Welcome adventurers and fellow world builders. My name is Yadro, and this is Yadro Gaming. I am so excited to talk about the video today because I've been talking for several videos now about how great the Quiet Year is. We've done all these steps to build up a nice little foundation for everyone to get into the campaign, create their backstories, and immerse themselves in the world that we just built in the Quiet Year. Now you get to see how all of that came together and how my players took that Quiet Year and made it their own into these backstories. We're going to be going through the document where I compiled all of their backstories in one place, and I went through and highlighted some things of interest that I'm going to be able to use during the game as a way to kind of guide you on things that you can pull from backstories as well to work at your table. So anything I have highlighted in green are interesting PCs that I'm going to be able to bring back at some point and introduce to the players. If it's in blue, that's a place or an organization that I know I'm going to have to reference later. And then there's also a yellow highlight, and that's going to be different role play threads that I think I can sprinkle in periodically throughout the campaign and just give them something to kind of keep their memories and their eyes on their backstories themselves. They can look for those little plot hooks when they arise. So in green, we have the NPCs that we're going to be working with. Blue are places and organizations, and yellow are the roleplay threads. The first player we're going to be talking about is Kyle, and he's created a character named Penny, who's a Harengon Artificer, and they come from Ambermere. So we see here that Penny grew up in Ambermere, and as a child, she was kind of getting into trouble. She didn't really fit in and doing the daily chores and tasks of this farm town, and instead she wanted to work with tools and contraptions and just kind of build things as artificers are wont to do. She would often make tools that were always a quote-unquote upgrade, but they wouldn't necessarily hold up to the hard work conditions of the settlement, which makes a lot of sense. In green here, our first NPCs, her parents were always supportive and would provide motivation, even though they had no input or way of actually helping her creative nature. I picture Ambermere as being like a very simple sort of place. It's going to be mostly filled with beast folk, as she is a Harengon. So her parents will also be Harengons, but then there's going to be a bunch of other beast folk roaming around, working the fields and just kind of having a simpler sort of life. So it would make sense they wouldn't see eye to eye with her on her artificer happenings or machinations, but at least they're supportive. So it'd be a fun thing to play where it's not all doom and gloom. It's actually like a highlight in her life. He goes on to say that she would often skip away from her chores and hide out in the woods to test those inventions, but they always fell short. One day she came back to the town center, and she basically stumbles in on the mercenaries from Tellerant that were normally there to help, but they had a different feel to them, a disdain. They were leaving, and there was turmoil in Ambermere, as we saw in the Quiet Year. But they were no longer friendly with the neighbors to the northwest. So Ambermere and Tellerant are now at odds, and we see that only a few remained, and they didn't seem to be the friendly mercenaries they were used to. They overate their field, and they extorted the extra crops that they were not owed. But the rumors of the gems that Tellerant has caught the imagination of Penny, and that made her want to do even more of these artificer creations. So Kyle did a great job here of pulling this whole paragraph essentially directly from the Quiet Year and about what we did in game. I think that was a really good job on his part of just taking what we did and what other people gave him and making it come to life. That's awesome. Penny was working on getting together the necessary arrangements to make the trip of her own to the north to secure some of those gems because she wanted to make them into the inventions. But as she was going to leave, another NPC named Pickle, who's a town troublemaker, basically called a meeting and was with these robes, and something weird was going on. She goes off to describe that Pickle threw off his cloak and revealed all sorts of abominations. His body was like fused with the gems, which is something new. In monstrous ways, and his hands, feet, and tail and face were all adorned with those gems, and they were pulsating and painful. But basically, he said, we need to fight Tellerant, and they needed someone that would lead them. Someone that would be their ruler, that was kind of adjusting to the new ways of the world that was affecting him. I think that's kind of a good little villain. And he was the most worthy because he is now the most strong. He's the strongest one there, and he has these gems to help him. Before he could finish, the mercenaries were able to beat him, but then he killed them all and himself in the process. That was something a little bit different. I think you could hear him mention this line about an idea he had when we actually played the Quiet Year. But again, that is exactly the events that happened in the Quiet Year that he took and made his own and added a little bit of extra to it that I can play with later. Finally, he goes on to say the city was now defenseless, the mercenaries dead, or back to defend in Tellerant, because if you remember, they left town. And this is a roleplay event that we can come back to later, where he says the gems were split up and buried in undisclosed places only few know of for fear of them starting a revolution again. Interesting little piece that I might be able to use against them in a future game. Ambermere wasn't ruled, there was no diplomacy, as it was never needed. There was no defense against the forests and pillagers that would soon be here to take what isn't theirs, for Ambermere didn't have fighters, at least not yet. So that is the call to action for Penny about how she wants to be this person that can maybe help defend them, using these machines that she can create, being an artificer. Ultimately, great job. Love the backstory. I think there's a lot to play there. No places or organizations, but we have a couple PCs that we can talk about, our NPCs, and then we have a roleplay item that I can get to later. I'd be interested to speak with him about that and see what his kind of visions are for what he thinks those gems should be used for, and then I've got some ideas of my own. Moving on, as we jump over to Dallas's character Mongo, who is a half-orc monk, which I'm really excited. I haven't had many monk players recently, so I'm really glad he chose that one, and he comes from Dur. So Mongo is a half-orc monk, and he is the sole survivor of the once thriving mountaintop settlement of Dur. So I have that listed as an NPC, but it's kind of like an anti-NPC, because he's trying to tell me that everyone that he knows there was dead, but that doesn't mean people haven't moved in since. And we know that there's been some movement there about other people in the Quiet Year that have come up there, and people have left. There's some conflicts that had arisen. So there's been a lot of movement to and from, but basically Dur is another dead city, but not officially dead like Brelwood. He goes on, a devastating winter storm and subsequent avalanche claimed the lives of his people, leaving him alone to carry the weight of their legacy. That was pulled directly from the Quiet Year when the devastating winter came through Dur. Despite the tragedy, Dur remains a sacred site, drawing pilgrims from across the land. Its unique blend of religious iconography and spiritual practices continues to inspire and heal. As the last guardian of Dur, Mongo feels a deep responsibility to protect its sanctity and share its teachings with the world. And now we're getting into one of the neatest little roleplay aspects that any of the characters came up with. His journey to the crossroads is a desperate attempt to rebuild his community and revive its spiritual power. He carries with him a pack filled with the pamphlets, each one a testament to the diverse beliefs that once flourished in Dur. He hopes to recruit new followers, individuals who are open-minded, spiritually inclined, and willing to embrace a new way of life. So he is literally going to be walking around with a pile of pamphlets, trying to pass them out and recruit people to come up to Dur. I just think that's hilarious. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it, and he's a great player that's going to be using that throughout. Just awesome. Mongo's goal is to lead a pilgrimage to Dur, to reestablish the community and share his transformative power with the world. He believes that by rebuilding the settlement, he can honor the memory of his lost people and create a new era of peace and prosperity. As he ventures into the lawless frontier, he is determined to overcome any obstacle and fulfill his sacred duty. Mongo is, this is a short description of him, but Dallas as a player is going to add much more depth to this as we play and as he learns his character. Dallas is really, really good about having just a kind of a bare bones idea about what he thinks his character's grounding is going to be, and then he just lets the dice tell a story, and he's really good about taking those moments and adding on to them how he sees Mongo developing, and I'm really excited to see where he goes. Awesome job. Mike is our next player. His character's name is Mizz Candie. She is a Warforged bard, and she hails from Muktuk. So I've heard him use his voice already a little bit. It's kind of Southern Belle-y, so I'm going to avoid trying to mimic that here, but you'll hear some audio clips of it, I'm sure, in the future. But he's writing as in he's first person here, just talking about a story. Oh, we're talking about ourselves? Normally I don't like being the center of attention, but I guess just this one time. And then he cues a spotlight being turned on and centered on him with a microphone suddenly in his hand. Howdy, y'all. My name is Mizz Candie, and it is a right pleasure to meet you. A little bit about myself. I was activated around 4 years ago and was originally designed to be a pleasure bot as the best little whorehouse in Muktuk called the Cat Snatch Saloon. That is our first organization or location. I was there to sing, play the banjo, dance, and most importantly, make love. Being so intuitive made me very good at my job by knowing exactly what any man was looking for and the best way on how to please him or her. Don't let that fool you. Just because I'm a working robo-girl doesn't mean that I ain't still a lady and deserve respect. Anywho, the boss man, Mr. Killian Tyact, saw how great I handled the menfolk, and then got a little bit too handsy or couldn't take the hint when a girl told them no, so they promoted me to Mizz of the Cat Snatch Saloon, which is just their fancy word for den mother or madam. So right there, he's throwing 2 more NPCs at us. He's given me titles to work with. Mizz is now a title of people that work at brothels usually. So he's throwing a lot at me here, and it's great. It gives me a lot to work with, and that's less I need to think about down the line. He continues. This tickled me pink, and not the cute fleshy ones I used to work with, and overall ended up being better suited for me, with me being so motherly and protective of my girls. Mr. Tyack is so smart for seeing my honest to goodness potential. He's the director of the brothel organization and operation Bureau Syndicate, or Boobs for short. The corporation is in Muktuk. Corporations are kind of the ruling organizations in Muktuk and are there to keep us prosperous and safe. They do such a good job. So right here, you can kind of see where her headspace is at. She really supports Mr. Killian Tyack. That might be like a programming that she has where like he's the boss and she needs to follow that. He came up with this cute little acronym of a syndicate that he'll be working for. So we'll be dealing with that in the future. And it's just kind of an interesting peek into what her thoughts are. And also that Muktuk has various corporations there. Now, if you just finished up the Quiet Year, you'll notice that they have a bit of like a moonshine ring and a bunch of these little brothels set up. So I imagine there's going to be a little tug of war there about which one is the best. But when you head into town, there's going to be all these different corporations you might need to work with as you pass through. And I think that'll be an interesting thing that I'll have to really have prepared when I get to those sessions. Something to think about in the future. Back to me. I've always loved taking care of others, whether that be a sick kitten or one of my girls going through a hard spot. Make no mistake, if anyone tries to manhandle or rough up one of my girls, I'll go all Mama Werebear and protect them, better than a snapping turtle. Clever wordplay there. Great job, Mike. They're my family, and I'll soon die, then let folks mistreat them. Luckily, Mr. Tyack and the Boobs Corporation take good care of us. Here in Muktuk, nobody messes with the brothels or the working girls. They had such great success with myself running the Cat Snatch Saloon, they brought in a new automated Mizz to run the other brothels here in Muktuk. I had the pleasure of activating them and training them in our profession. I love all of my sisters dearly, even if there's a little sibling rivalry if we don't always see eye to eye. So there's a new roleplay aspect that I'll try to bring in at some point, whether it's in Muktuk, obviously, or outside of it. But there's these new automated Mizzes running around. I'm not really sure where these Warforges are coming from, because I have a little bit of lore built into my campaign about them, but I'll figure that out in the future. I'm sorry. Somehow I got off topic. Somehow I got more off topic than a jackalope trying to find its way back to its burrow. Mr. Tyack recently brought in a new Mizz to run the Cat Snatch Saloon, Ms. Julep. Bless her heart. The lights are on, but nobody's home. He wants me to head to the crossroads to seek out some new talent, but I have a feeling he wants me gone for some reason. I've been doing my best and don't quite understand why he felt a change was necessary. So this will be his antagonist as we head to Muktuk. He's going to have to see her eventually, and that's going to be a really interesting situation. I love all of these little things he put in there, talking about a jackalope. Just very clever. He's really getting into character, and I just think it's awesome. So now we head into another RP moment here. The only thing that I could think of that's changed were these recent feelings that I've been having. I think what you flesh-based models call them are memories. In these memories, I see myself differently, almost like a squishy meat sack and with a family. Very peculiar and odd. Why would these images pop into my mental space without warning? Really interesting that he went this route. I don't know how much he looked into Warforges or their lore, but in my world, Warforged are powered by something like called a soul stone that like hold the souls of other people that have passed. And there's like whole fields of these underground, like where souls just like get trapped in a certain layer of rock. And if you mine those out, you can actually power Warforges with them, and they take on some of the personality traits and some of the memories and stuff of their inhabitants, or like where they were in their mortal life. Haven't worked out the kinks exactly of why that happens, but just know that it does, and that's how they power Warforges, and that's what gives them like actual life. So they're not just machines, but there's a little bit of humanity in there as well. So hopefully we'll get to delve into that a little bit, and if we go to the higher levels, I'm sure that that'll come up at some point. Now Mr. Tyack wants me to head to the crossroads, looking for new talent like I'm a recruiter instead of just the Mizz of the Cat Snatch. It's a fine enough assignment, but, well, it feels like being put out to pasture, don't it? I aim to do my best, but I can't help wondering what my place is supposed to be now. Having a little bit of second thoughts here. She's actually kind of challenging what her Mr. Tyack wants, but she's going to trust him, carry on, and she's going to do what she needs to do because that's what she was told. Either way, when the boss man gives you an assignment, then you hop to it. So I'm here traveling to follow you to the crossroads. I know I'm traveling with mostly men, so I'll just remind you all to be on your best behavior, mind your P's and Q's, and be respectful. It'll be a great honor and pleasure to meet you and get to know y'all. Awesome write-up. I think he did a great job. He gave me a ton to work with here. We have several locations, we have NPCs, we have roleplay opportunities, and I'm going to be able to use all of that throughout the campaign. Really clever way of writing there. He threw in a bunch of jokes, and I can already see him using a lot of those puns throughout the campaign. Really excited where he takes Mizz Candie. Dylan's up next. He created a lady by the name of Shey. She's an Eladrin, another Artificer, so we'll have two in this campaign, but they're taking different archetypes. And he hails from Morricone. So he has it split up by sections here, but early life in the Feywild. Shey was born in the Huli clan, a vibrant and whimsical community deep in the Feywild, where emotions and seasons shaped daily life. So right there, we already have an NPC, a location or organization, and then we have roleplay opportunities as well. I foresee him switching emotions and appearance based on what she does in the campaign. The Huli clan is something that if we ever go to the Feywild, which if we want to be planeswalkers, we probably will, that's who we're going to be looking for at the Huli clan, maybe for help. And then obviously the Feywild itself is a place that we may discover as we go. As a child, Shey's days are filled with playful mischief, snowball fights that often ended with someone tumbling into a snowdrift, long naps in the sunlit leaf piles, and endless exploration of crystalline lakes. One particularly memorable day, a snowball hit her squarely between the eyes, sparking a brief flush of fiery anger that melted the snowball on her face. Laughter erupted, first from her peers and then from Shey herself. It was in that moment she learned the magic of joy and how quickly emotions could transform her. Shey's love for the magical surroundings grew as she did. She spent hours weaving artistry from nature, carefully altering the shapes of flowers and trees to create ephemeral drawings. She's also asked the florist's consent, whispering to each plant as she worked, and they corresponded by blooming into vibrant, enchanting forms. Her creations were celebrated by her clan, who saw her as a budding artist with a bright, inquisitive heart. As she worked with the plants, they would fill her ears with stories of gods and goddesses past, and the innate magic of the Feywild itself. So that's a different take on an Artificer. That sounds a little bit like a nature cleric or a druid or maybe a ranger, but I really liked that he was going in this direction because it just feels a little bit different and like fresh. So I encouraged him to continue on that path because I just thought it would be a lot of fun. The winter solstice. The winter solstice ritual. The Huli clan celebrated the winter solstice with grandeur, but the third solstice of the year felt different. Shey, honored for her skill with flowers and her keen eye for beauty, was chosen to place a ceremonial new moon in the sky, a symbol of the season's transition. Shey crafted the moon from delicate Feywild flora and shimmering geodes, her fingers weaving magic and art into a perfect crescent. Here we go to another RP moment. As the clan chanted and Shey lifted the moon into the air, something strange happened. The air stilled, her hands passed right through the moon, and the light around her dimmed. When she looked up, the moon's glow seemed to blot out her view of the Feywild, and when it cleared, Shey found herself standing in a starkly different place. The vibrant colors of her home were gone, replaced by muted tones of a grassy plain under an unfamiliar sky. So this is a major event in her life, and I think what is happening here is that this was literally passing on a season, where we were literally going from one season to another, and someone or something didn't want the season to change. So with the Seelie and Unseelie court, with Queen Mab versus Queen Titania, I think that something is at play here, where Shey was getting ready to pass the moon and symbolically change the seasons along as well on the solstice, and someone came in and plane shifted her to the material plane and away from there so it couldn't occur. So that is definitely going to be a big thing for us to look at later. Next, we have the arrival in Morricone. Disoriented but determined, Shey followed the distant sounds of voices to a nearby town, Morricone. The town was bustling with life, its people warm and welcoming. Shey quickly discovered their love of art and wine, which reminded her of the joyful creativity of the Feywild, and the chickens of various sizes made her wonder if she had ever left at all. Though everything felt new and strange, she found comfort in the mortals' laughter and their delight in small, fleeting beauties. In her weeks there, she began to adapt to the material plane, using her natural artistry to craft and enchant small objects. She shared stories of the Feywild, captivating the townsfolk while learning from their practical ingenuity and artisan techniques. Her curiosity only deepened as she realized how different and fascinating the material world was. So this is Dylan rolling in several things from the Quiet Year. The chickens of various sizes reference the chocobo-sized creatures that are going to be coming into play here, along with some of the miniature animals, I think, that they found at one point between Muktuk and Morricone. So great job of weaving those in. I love that he's pulling in Shey's background with the Feywild, using those stories to kind of captivate the audience, get people on their side. I think that's awesome. And then getting into the artistry of the glass blowing, glass work, and fashioning that herself, kind of taking her Artificer skills with nature and bringing that into Morricone and dealing with the glass too, I think is a great way of pulling that all together. A journey to the crossroads. Shey's heart, always yearning for creation and discovery, put her eyes to the crossroads. Inspired by the simple yet profound beauty she found in Morricone, she decided to travel further, seeking new forms of art, new people, and new places. Glassblowing had captured her imagination. The way fire and earth could be transformed into something delicate and luminous reminded her of the fleeting beauty of the Feywild. With her tools in hand and a memory of the winter solstice still fresh in her mind, Shey set out with a group of Tagans. She hoped to uncover the mystery of why she was drawn to the material plane and to see what other wonders the world had to offer. Great encapsulation there, great reasoning for why she is on the way to the crossroads, traveling with these shipments, and just all around great job. I know that he did some tweaking on this one. We had been talking back and forth, and as he made it, just to make sure that it fit the tone of what we were trying to do, checking out to see if the nature artificer was an option here, and kind of reskinning that to work with the glass. And I think he said that she was going to have some glass made into her armor. I think it's just a really cool idea and a great visual. He did a good job. Next up is Paul. If you remember, I might have mentioned at one point that he kind of had an idea for what kind of character he wanted to run. This character named Nine, the Shadar-Kai rogue, and I believe he wants to go Soul Knife. And he's kind of from Tellarant, but we don't really know where he's from, which we'll see in a second. So Nine was one of many test subjects held captive by Mind Flayers. His name is Nine because he doesn't remember who he was before his captivity, and he is referred to as Subject Nine by his captors. The Mind Flayers wanted access to the forbidden knowledge, or to forbidden eldritch knowledge of the old gods, but knew it would drive them mad if they exposed themselves to it. So right there, we've got NPCs building up, and the Mind Flayers are an organization along with the old gods. They found a temple to the old gods in one place. The Mind Flayers is something he added in, but there is that cave to the Underdark. All of this is tying in with the world that we built, so fantastic start already. Nine and the other prisoners were kind of like filters to look into the void. The Mind Flayers shielded their minds in some way, though not completely effectively, and forced these individuals to look into the void and then access the minds of the prisoners. Nine was the lowest numbered subject, meaning 8 before him had finally had their minds completely shattered from the constant exposures. Now, a shattered mind does not mean that they are dead. So 1 through 8 could still be out there doing who knows what. And we also don't know how many were after 9. We just know that there's a bunch of them and they were all numbered, and that's what they were used for. But I could definitely see some fractured-minded test subjects coming back into play at some point. At some point, the lab was raided by heroes and adventurers, allowing Nine the opportunity to escape. He hoped some of the others made it, but he saw the adventurers that made his escape possible get completely eviscerated by the Mind Flayers. So odds are these people did not survive. Mind Flayers are known for ripping brains out and eating them, so I don't think that they would have survived that, but I wonder if some of their husks did. If they could have a intellect devour or something crawl in there and pilot them. But it'll be interesting to see if we can work that into the campaign later. Nine was presumably a normal-looking, average elf prior to his captivity. Unfortunately, both his body and mind were altered by the experiments. He has ashen, almost sickly-looking skin and sunken eyes that look like they haven't slept in months. He tends to keep the cloak of his hood up to hide the symbol that was branded onto his neck. Not because he's vain or worried about his appearance, but because he's become extremely paranoid and terrified the Mind Flayers will find him. He always feels like there are eyes on him and acts accordingly strange. So anytime I can have him feel like he's being watched, or if he fails a perception check as a player and as a character, I think they're going to be paranoid about that. So no, you don't notice anything out of the ordinary, and then it'll spike his fears and paranoia. That's going to be a lot of fun. After his escape, he ended up at the base of the mountains in Tellarant. Nine was not the soldier mercenary type, so he was struggling to make enough coin to eat and get shelter from the cold. Gil, another NPC, a local fixer, took advantage of this, offering Nine some simple dirty work. Initially, it was delivering messages and ferrying packages without drawing attention, but Gil saw more potential for profit with Nine. Very quickly, Nine was working in the shadows to gather information and valuables, and soon after that, taking out the occasional target. Gil left town shortly after hearing the news of Tellarant, gearing up for the fight with Burlwood. In need of coin and curious where his contact was, Nine decided to hire on as a taggant and make for the crossroads. Another great implementation here of things that we did in the Quiet Year. He gave me a nice NPC that we can do a callback to. At some point, he's going to want to meet that guy. Since that is his roguish informant, he's going to probably want to do some work with them or get some information from them in the future. So that'd be a great way to tie in just some lore for the players that you would learn from Gil when they head up to Teleron. It feels like something they're going to be doing later on in the campaign, but if they do kind of get there early, it'd be a way for me to just add in some interesting little facts and maybe some quests for him to draw them into the rest of the world. He did a great job here. I don't think he's going to play like a super brooding character. I think he's kind of playing it from the tone of like, these are my friends, these are my party, I'm going to protect them. They're going to protect me, but like these are the only people I have in my life, and I would die for them. So I'm hoping that's the direction he takes. I think that'd be pretty cool. Last but not least, we have Charlie. His character is Draven Velendral, a Drow ranger whose settlement is Brelwood, but he may be from a different place altogether. So Draven Velendral was born into the powerful House Velendral, a family of cunning Drow nobles who ruled a vast domain in the treacherous Underdark. As the third son of matron mother Ileana Velendral, Draven's role was to safeguard his house's power through subterfuge, alliances, and ruthless ambition. Gifted with a silver tongue and the deadly precision of a trained duelist, he was a rising star among the Drow elite destined for greatness. So right there, if you couldn't guess, he has a noble background, which is normally kind of frustrating to play with because normally players would want to take that, weaponize it, and say, oh, I have all these things at my disposal. But he ran from home. He was a third son of the matron mother, which I think he's designating as like not a good role necessarily to be in, but he is doing all of this kind of roguish things here. But I think he was actually a magic caster in the past. At least that's what he had mentioned to me. So let's keep reading and see if that's where we get to. Draven's pride, however, proved to be his undoing. Tasked with outmaneuvering an adventuring party that had stumbled into the Underdark, which how many people have? A ton. He underestimated their resolve. The surface dwellers, a diverse and determined group of warriors, mages, and rogues, proved to be more resourceful than he anticipated. In their climactic confrontation, the adventurers turned the tide of battle and invoked a powerful planar banishment spell. Before he could deliver a fatal blow, Draven was ripped from the Underdark, hurled across dimensions, and stranded in an alien world he had never imagined. So, another adventuring party shows up and bested him, so they could still be alive, even if they were hanging out in the Underdark, in this Drow city, nearby where this powerful noble house was. Really looking forward to if we go down into the Underdark, how I can use all of this against him as well. A new life in an unfamiliar universe. Draven awoke in a bustling trade city under an open sky, a sight both mesmerizing and repulsive to one accustomed to the eternal darkness of the Underdark. Stripped of his noble title, resources, reputation, and the source of his family's powerful magic, he found himself utterly alone. The Drow's sinister reputation preceded him, and the locals viewed him with suspicion and fear. So that tells me anyone that is from Brelwood probably isn't going to take too kindly from him unless they get to know him on an individual level. So some of that like Drow racism is kind of up here, which I'm not going to lean into all that much because I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, but that is in his backstory that I could use if I needed to. Forced to adapt, Draven abandoned his noble heirs and assumed a new identity. He fled to Brelwood and became Darren Velen, a commoner scraping by as a petty thief, mercenary, and sometimes a laborer when at his lowest. His finely honed skills in diplomacy and elven acrobatics in combat served him well in this new life, though he struggled to suppress his innate arrogance and disdain for surface dwellers. Inner conflict and growth. Though Draven resented his fall from grace, the harshness of his new existence began to teach him humility. He witnessed acts of kindness, loyalty, and sacrifice that were alien concepts to the cutthroat world of Drow society. Gradually, he began to question the morality of his former life. His bitterness toward the adventurers who banished him shifted into grudging respect as he came to understand the strength of their conviction. Great development there, like personal growth that he's having where he's kind of seeing the good in the world now that he's topside. And I wonder how that will conflict if he ever went back down to the Underdark and ran into these people that he's supposed to like and trust. Redemption or revenge. Draven's ultimate path remains uncertain. He still harbors a deep desire to return to the Underdark, reclaim his noble status, and exact revenge on the adventurers who ruined him. Yet, a part of him wonders if his banishment was a blessing in disguise. an opportunity to forge a new identity free from the web of treachery that defined his old life. In this new universe, Draven walks a precarious line between his dark heritage and the potential for redemption. His journey is one of survival, self-discovery, and the ever-present question of whether he will embrace the light of his new world or succumb to the shadows of his past. So there he's kind of laying out short-term, long-term goals for me that I can play with based on their decisions and where they actually get to. But I think he keeps harkening back to this like being in a different universe. And in the Quiet Year, we put a cave on the map that is a direct link to the Underdark. So I think it's an interesting situation here that he ended up in Brellwood, which is only like 30 miles from this cave where he could get back to the Underdark. So it's kind of like home was really close to you, but you just didn't know that was how you got there. But the whole time he's like wanted to go home, and it was, a couple days travel away at worst if he wanted to actually get back to the Underdark. But I think that's where he's going to end up in the first couple, maybe not the first couple sessions, but if we start to look for a way to go to the Underdark and they find it, or when people start talking about that, he's going to say, wait a second, I came from there. Like you're saying I can just go back, and then we'll move on from there. Great job from him. I think this is an interesting character concept. I know he usually plays druids or other casters, so to kind of move into a ranger role, he's going to be dual wielding weapons and kind of getting into the fray of things. I think that's a great way to challenge himself, and I'm really excited to see him play it. Great job. So those are the players I get to have during this campaign. I'm really excited with all that they added in from the Quiet Year. I love how much they added about their own backstories, about what they wanted the characters to be. They gave me a ton of NPCs, roleplay events, organizations, and places that they can go visit. And all of that is going to come together to make a great campaign, I can already tell. Between those 6 characters and the 6 places they came from, including 2 different planes that they want to visit, I think we've got plenty of material here to get us into a nice long campaign, should we want to shoot for that 15 to 17 levels that they gave me in the questionnaire that I sent out before the campaign even began and before even session 0 with the Quiet Year. So all of them followed directions really well. They did a great job of building this all together, placing themselves in the world and building off one another to create some pretty cool characters that I think are going to have some really good interactions at the table. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. I hope this is helpful, kind of see how I pull out elements from the characters' backstories to have a list of NPCs, places, and locations, and roleplay opportunities for them throughout the campaign. I hope that you can go through the backstories of your characters and pull those things out as well, so you can really personalize the adventure to the players that you have at your table. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel, like, comment. Give me your own insights about the greatest backstories you've ever made, or how you've pulled backstories from players that you've had to make a really memorable campaign for your players. I'll see you in the next video. And remember, why be a player when you can be a god?